Emergency sheltering part 2. So today we're going to talk about how to read dog body language and cat body language, talking about rotations and how to keep the dogs and us safe, and then go on a little bit about daily rounds that's important for the safety of the animals, the health of the animals, and just kind of monitoring how everybody is doing. So reading dog body language. Dogs are really they're always trying to tell us something, and we're two different species speaking two different languages. We are more like the apes who like hugs, and we're two-footed, and the way that we interact with other humans can often be confrontational or completely misunderstood by dogs. And the way that dogs speak to each other, we completely miss. And so there's a lot of miscommunication between dogs and humans unless we read their body language to say, this is what they're trying to tell us. So look at the bitey end, not the tail. So many people are like, but he was wagging her tail. She was wagging, the tail. And dogs wag their tails for a variety of different reasons, everywhere from being happy to being aroused, nervous, trying to appease us, to make us, okay, we're okay, I want more distance, or when they're playing, or if you see dogs prey driving, so going after small animals, or even going after each other during dog fights, or when they're taking down humans. For the sports of the bite sports, the dogs will be wagging their tails. Winnie likes to hunt moles out in the field, and she's wagging her tail while trying to, kill another animal. So dogs wag their tails when they have emotions, and whether they're good or they're bad. So looking at the face where the bite is going to happen will keep you and the dog the safest. So we're going to look at each body part like it's a word in the sentence, put those body parts together to make that sentence, and then look at the environment to kind of look at the paragraph and what the dog is trying to tell us. So we kind of start up on the head, and we look at the mouth, the ears, the eyes, and then next we look at the body. Is it stiff or is it loose? Is it pulled back away from you, trying to get more space? Or is it forward, either trying to get more information, wanting to interact with you, or wanting to bite you? And are they squared off to you, or are they kind of pulled off to the side? And then the tail is the last thing we kind of looking at, so that we can put the tail in context with the head and the rest of the body. So, and we're going to look at pictures of if it's tucked up over the back, sitting naturally. Is it wagging slow? Is it wagging fast? Or wagging in circles? So the tail can tell us a lot, but only in context of the rest of the body and the head. And then we're going to put it all together and then take into account the environment. So the bitey end first. So there are 3 parts of the dog's mouth that you want to look at. The tongue. So if the tongue is flopped over, kind of like those goofy dogs that you see, really loose, and that means that they're relaxed and they're happy. Sometimes they can be you can still see the tongue, or they're panting and it's kind of like tucked in tight and not, it's very stiff. So you'll hear me saying that a lot through this entire presentation. With cats and dogs, are they loose or are they stiff? And it's kind of with people too, right? When we're relaxed and going, we're very loose when we're with our friends and we're hanging out with our families, but we can be more stiff when we're walking into the doctor's office or we're walking into a new environment that we've never been, or a room full of strangers. We're a little bit more guarded, we're a little bit more stiff, and it's the same for the cats and the dogs. Teeth, how many can you see? The more you see, the bigger risk the bite is. And so especially when you see the tops, right, of the teeth. And then the lips. So long lips mean that they're a little bit more anxious. And short lips means that they're more concerned, and the shorter the lips and the more pulled forward they are, the bigger the risk of the bite is going to come. And so when you see a dog close their mouth and bring their mouth up forward into what we call an offensive pecker, usually that means a bite is going to happen if they're not given the space that they need. Eyes, are they squinty and soft or wide and round? So you kind of see Hercules right here. His eyes are a perfect example of wide and round. And they're not what we call a hard eye. He's a very soft eye. To me, he's just trying to gather more information. He's probably like, what is that weird camera in front of my face? But we kind of see him, he's standing with his ears up and forward. They're not off to the side, and his lips are long and kind of soft. Like his whole face is a little soft besides the wrinkles on his forehead are a little concerned. And so putting kind of his face all together, I would say Hercules is just trying to gather more information. He's a little concerned, wants more information to figure out, is he safe, or does he need to protect himself by backing up, by whining. Hercules was a great dog here at the shelter. So signs of a happy, relaxed dog, right? They have a really relaxed body. They have relaxed facial expressions. And there's no need for a quick getaway. So like as you see Winnie right now, she, like these dogs are just lying down, have no reason to try to get up and flee the situation. And so when you're approaching a dog in a kennel, if they're laying down and they're kind of laying down in a manner that they're just kind of relaxed and happy, that means you can kind of proceed. They're not guarded at all. Another couple of relaxed facial expressions here. They're just kind of, their ears are kind of sit naturally. As you see their tongues, they're kind of splayed out. They look like a spoon, but there's not a lot of wrinkles in them. So like a tight tongue would have a lot of wrinkles. These tongues are kind of look like a spatula. So they're either panting because they're hot, or they're just relaxed. So light panting for both of these. And as you see with their eyes, they're soft eyes. Now, Earl here, I want you to remember his eyes, because in a little bit we're going to talk about moon eyes and like seeing the whites of the eyes, and taking breed in consideration when you're doing that is really important, because Earl has a natural droopiness to his eyes, and you're always going to see the whites of his eyes. And so again, going back to that first slide, taking into context when we're looking at their faces. And then stay alert. Changes can happen really fast. So this is, you kind of see the difference between Hercules' eyes and this dog's eyes. They're both round and big, right? Like they're both round and wide, but you see the whites of this dog's eyes, called a half moon eye, when you didn't see any white in Hercules' eyes. And then if you just take away the mouth and just look at the eyes, they're not as soft as Hercules's. He has a hard stare. And then of course, you see his mouth is pulled forward into a wrinkle, and you see the tops of his teeth. He's saying, please stay away from my bone. And just a moment later, he was just relaxed, chewing his bone. Someone walked up, and he changed just like that. And that can happen with shelter dogs too. So you're walking, they're not relaxed and happy, and they see another dog approaching, and their whole body can change quickly. Or we do have you could have some resource guarders in the shelter that you don't know about. And so when you're giving enrichment, they can be like, oh my gosh, it's enrichment. We hand it to them, they change to that in a second, because now they're guarding their enrichment. And we learn more information about the dog. And obviously, this is not a dog that you're going to approach to try to take the bone away. So signs of stress, the whale eye. So you saw Earl's eyes, his whites were down below, and that's probably how he always is. Whale eye is usually on the side. So you kind of see with the Roddy here, his eyes are to the side, his head is averted. He's asking for more space by leaning back. He is sideways, and his ears are kind of pinned back. And so this is a dog that his mouth is still open, and his tongue, as you see, is not a big floppy spatula. It's kind of more tucked in. But he has still a nice long lip, so he's a little anxious. So as you're approaching this dog, the minute he would close his mouth is when I would probably give him a little bit more space to kind of see, to show him that I don't mean, like, I'm not gonna hurt you. And then we see like dogs, like, will close their eyes, will be really squinty, will put their paw up, will make themselves feel very small when they're trying to appease you. When they're like, please don't hurt me. They'll tuck their tail, they'll lean back towards you, and they'll make themselves look little. So those are kind of signs of appeasement, signs of stress, because even scared dogs and stressed out dogs can bite and will bite. And then what we call displacement signals. They used to be called stress signals or something like stress signals, but we really don't know, like, we can't really tell why the dog is doing these, except that everything that they're doing is out of context of, so this is all normal dog behavior, except when they're doing it out of context, that means they're stressed. So I like the term displacement signals instead. So all dogs scratch themselves, all dogs lick their lips after they get done eating. All dogs go to the bathroom and sniff things. But when they're doing it excessively, that means they're really stressed. So you'll see dogs who are really stressed sniff one spot intensely for a long period of time, like on your pant leg, on the floor, or they'll just be like, oh, like you bring a dog into play group and they're like, oh, it's another dog. I'm just gonna go here and sniff this really interesting patch of grass for a long time. Or the lip licking. You'll see like there's no food around, there's no reason, and you approach the dog and they start licking their lips. And it's just really quick, up out of their nose, back in. And then scratching too. Like you might see dogs who are getting ready to go for a walk. You leash them up and they walk, they stop, they scratch, they go back on, they walk a few more steps, they stop, they scratch. If they're here, they're treated for fleas. They're going to be treated for fleas at intake. So that means it's a displacement. It is outside the context of normal dog behavior. You'll also see sweaty paws. You'll see lots of shaking off. So even though they don't have dog, or they just didn't get a bath, or they didn't jump in the pond, they're not wet, and you still see them shaking off, that's also a displacement signal. And you'll see that a lot too in playgroup, like a dog or with people. So if you watch when you're walking around in public and people walk up to a dog and they pet them and get in their face and scruff them and do all this crazy stuff, and a dog's like, okay, and he'll walk away and he'll shake off. He's like, okay, that's good. You'll see a lot of that if you're on the lookout for it. Excessive drinking, excessive grooming to where they are leaving spots on. We probably see a lot of the excessive eating and drinking here at the shelter. Hal was one. He's finally now drinking a normal amount of water. Excessive drooling. So like we didn't just walk them out in the field to pick up a lot of smells. They're just sitting in their kennel and they're drooling a lot. And then that hyperactivity. So you'll see like the dogs that just can't settle down, Begonia, Homer, and then you were getting them out of the kennel, they're jumping up at our faces and they're snapping, they're grabbing the leash and they're pulling, and you can't get them to settle down. That hyperactivity is also a sign of stress. And even though we're meeting their exercise needs, they're still a little anxious and they're still stressed. Warning signals. So here's what we want to look out for to prevent bites. The body is leaning forward on the dog, almost like they're on their tiptoes. Their ears are forward, their mouth is closed. If they're wagging their tail, it's not a friendly wag. Like I said, loose versus stiff. It's a very stiff wag. A lot of the times it's up higher than their natural sit. It's high on the back, sometimes over arch, and it's just kind of fast moving like that. It's just everything about the dog is tense. Their ears are flat, not up. They have the whale eye, and everything is just tense, and they're averting everything. They're trying to say, please go away, please go away. Because aggression in dogs takes a lot of energy. It's a lot of calories. And dogs will do everything they can to show you, I don't want to bite you. Please go away, by making these signals. And then, of course, the tail. So the tail is like a high tail is confident. It's kind of, you want to look at the base of the tail, especially when they don't have a natural tail. And it's just very stiff. And sometimes it could be right before they're ready to go after a rabbit or a mole. But they're just high, they're stiff, or it's straight out, and it's just not loose and floppy. So like I was saying the whole time, look for the wiggles. Look for C shapes in the dogs. I think Doug is a perfect example. Once he gets past his initial reaction, he's very like loose and wiggly, like a wet noodle. So those dogs are super soft, super wiggly, and dogs that are scared or about to bite will be very stiff. And happy dog, like the tails for happy dogs wag in circles. We call them helicopter tails. They wag in circles. You see that a lot in Labradors. You see that a lot in the retriever mixes. Or they have like loose sweeping motions. Think like kind of like a windshield wiper, just kind of like sweeping motion. And then, as I said in the last one, aroused dogs will have fast moving tails. And then nervous, scared dogs will tuck their tail under their bodies. And then more warning signals of seeing other dogs. As you see this dog, he's squared off. So this is Jennifer went out on this dog in Grandview. And he ended up getting off of his leash and actually attacking them. And so he was squared off to them. And everything, as you see, is forward. And you see that tight, short lip up there, the hard eyes versus Hercules' eyes that were soft, even though they're both round and big. And he's almost on his tippy toes, as you kind of see. And then you'll kind of see them puff their cheeks out. And then their pupils will be really, really big. Same with cats, too. So whining, sometimes dogs will whine before, because scared dogs bite too. Like scared dogs, fearful dogs, dogs that are hurt, even though they can be as sweet as pie, they can bite. Fear-aggressive dogs, sometimes some of the worst bites because they are scared. And then versus like kind of more of the offensive, aggressive dogs. As you see, his tail is even with his body and kind of more stiff, and everything is just up. And you can kind of see some teeth there. Versus that tail, so you kind of see the difference between his tail when it's stiff versus Billy's tail, which is shaped like a C. And so you kind of see like C shapes in the mouth, C shapes in the body, C shapes in the tail. So we're going to practice some. So you see that her tongue is flopped over. Her teeth, we don't really see a lot of her teeth. Her mouth is a C. Her eyes are squinty and soft. Her ears are at a normal. And then her paw is raised, because she's not trying to get away fast. She's just very loose. So this is a dog that I would call over to me to pet. And then we have Arnie here. His mouth is closed. You kind of see more worry in him, a little bit more fear. His lips are still long though, even though it is closed. He has a really big furrow of worry in his eyebrows, but his his eyes are still soft and squinty, and his ears are so pulled back that you can't even see them. So he's a little nervous, Arnie is, and so I would go slow, be gentle, patient for you. I would probably sit and make myself feel small, turn to the side so that I'm not confronting him head on. So, and then, and Arnie ended up being a wild child after he got used to us. And then this is Frodo. So you kind of see Frodo is scared too, but you see the difference between Frodo's fear and Arnie's fear. I wish I was trying to lighten this photo up, but his tail is tucked. So if you see his tail, it is tucked. His mouth is closed. His ears are also pulled back, and you see his head's a little bit to the side. But he's a little bit more stiff than Arnie is. And so even though he is scared too, he's a little bit more stiff. And so I would just be a little bit more cautious about calling Frodo to me. And so kind of wrapping it all together, we want loose, wiggly, soft, think wet noodle dogs. Nervous and scared dogs bite too. So even when we want to, we shouldn't force contact with them to make them feel better, because sometimes they're not asking for that. And session 3, we will go over on how to interact with hyperactive dogs and shy, fearful dogs in a way that they would appreciate a lot more. Always listening for growling and then those sudden changes. So a mouth that was open and panting that suddenly closes, ears that were kind of more back and natural, pin forward, or ears that were up, pin back real quick. And eyes that go from soft and round to like their pupils blow or they get dilated. So we can spend an entire weekend on this topic, watching videos, watching more pictures and everything. You guys see 50 dogs a day to be able to read their dog body language. So there is a webinar series that the ASPCA Pro goes through, and I can send the link that you guys can go through, and it's a whole series of how dogs communicate, so that we do have an entire weekend of this stuff. And then real quick, feline body language. You kind of see the similarities in dogs and cats, right? They're not trying to get a big, quick getaway. They're lounging, they're relaxed. Their eyes are kind of squinty and soft. Their ears are naturally set. They're on their backs, they're on their sides. They're playing. They groom cats. That's why we feed the cats their wet food, is to check to see if they're eating. Because sometimes we don't really notice them eating their dry food. So they're grooming and they are eating. So a cat that doesn't eat. So for dogs, I'll say, okay, that's kind of normal for dogs to go 3 days without eating when they come here. The 4th day they usually eat. Dr. Walker would want to know right away if a cat is not eating. That's kind of the first sign that they are not feeling better. So a cat that's usually eating his wet food, when you come back to undouble down and you still see the wet food is there, that's a good time to put in a note to the vet. So sick cats kind of look like a loaf of bread when they're sitting, and so they're going to be tucked in tight. And obviously that top one is thick. But that bottom one you can kind of miss, especially when they come in looking like that a lot of the times. But they're all kind of tucked in. They look like a loaf of bread. Their head is down. So even though they look like they could be content when they look like a loaf of bread, when they're sitting like that, they're not. Signs of stress with cats, their ears are back, their body is stiff, they're in the back of their cage, their pupils are dilated, so they take up the entire eye. You don't see a lot of color. Their tail is fluffed, and they wrap their tail around them, they raise their paw. They also lip lick, they also avert their eyes. And like number 6 here, she's in the back of the cage. You kind of see her eyes are not a nice soft squinty. It's a more stiff squinty eye in number 6 there. And her tail is wrapped around and she looks like a loaf of bread. So signs of stress and overstimulation, they start yawning. So every single time before I get bit by a cat, their tail starts swishing. So once they start swishing their tail, I know I'm in trouble and I petted their belly too long. They start urine marking, which is what Odie did in his house, which is why he's back. He started urine marking, so he was a little stressed. He was living with 3 other cats, so he's not marking in his kennel now, but he's the only cat in there. And they fluff their tail up. So, and overstimulated cats definitely will get you. So rough play, so we're playing with them. Excessive play, we're playing with them too long. Of course, when they got the fishing pole, toy, so the high prey drive. When you come home at the end of the day, so for sheltering, it's when we're arriving in the morning or when it's feeding time, they could become overstimulated. And then a female in heat, testosterone, catnip, so things like that can overstimulate a cat. So it's really easy, especially with kittens, to want to play with them with your hand and your arm. All that does is teach them that when they go home with children and go home with the adults, to come and run and attack your hand and your arm when the adopter's just trying to pet them. So just like we do with puppies, always have a toy in your hand, and when they start attacking your hand, you tell them no and give them that toy. And so let them attack and play with the toy, and hands are for petting and toys are for attacking and scratching and being cute. That way we're not getting returns for being too rough with children or being too rough with with even the adults sometimes. Some more warning signals. So they're a lot like the dogs. The ears are flattened, the eyes are dilated, the tail fluffs up. They're going to make their body look large. They have stiff bodies, direct stares. So this will be really easy. They're likely growling. So this will be really easy to remember because it's very similar to dogs. And so you kind of see a mother protecting her baby. So she's a little off to the side. Her ears are kind of to the side too. And then of course the eyes are dilated in the first 2 pictures. And then there's this kind of more. So when they say cats just bit me out of nowhere, the reason why we miss the cats that bite out of nowhere are their eyes change. So they go from dilated to quickly not dilated, like the 3rd picture right there, and then they're going to bite. And so that is the small change that we miss with the cats. And so as we're trying to get a cat out of the kennel, to put in the box to go home and things like that, if you just look at their eyes, if nothing else, and you see their eyes go from a blown pupil to a slit, that's the part that people miss when the cat bit out of nowhere. No, it's that slight change in their eyes. And then of course we kind of see the facial expressions to kind of help. Ears are flattened, everything. For number 4, they're scared. And then they're playful. Squinty is content. So notice the ears and the pupils to keep yourself from getting bit by a cat. So you see number 1, she's scared. 2, she's overstimulated. You see the tail sticking straight up and kind of stiff. Everything's forward. The pupils in number 4 right here, the orange cat, are completely blown, very overstimulated. And then she's showing you all her teeth. She's mad, just like a dog. Her ears are pinned back, and I wouldn't approach that angry kitty. So that was kind of dog body language and cat body language. Really watching videos when you're out in public, watching dogs, especially for those displacement signals, and just practicing. It's really just a lot of practice. And then if you do get yourself into trouble with a dog, when you're kind of reviewing everything, seeing what did the dog try to tell me before that happened. So if you're watching play group and then it tips from play to aggression, what did happen with that dog's body before it tipped over to aggression? And that will just make you an expert more and more. So handling dogs in a kennel environment. So it's a lot different than walking your own dogs at home, because you have they're excited, they're happy, there's a whole bunch of them. So while we are practicing looking at dogs' body language, we need to be aware of our own body language. And so when you're approaching the kennel, you're approaching a dog outside, everything that the dog is trying to tell us, we need more space, squaring off, being stiff, staring at them directly in the eyes, that to a dog, if we're doing that to a dog, they're saying, oh, they're being aggressive, they're being offensively aggressive towards me, and that could change. But if we go to the side, like we're going to the side, we make ourselves look a little small, we are not leaning over, instead of leaning over the dog to pet them, we're squatting down to pet them. We're not making direct eye contact with them, and our tone is happy. And then we are also just breathing calmly, and we're just staying calm around the dog. And so just make sure that we're not, when we're walking up to a dog, we're not walking like this, we're walking more kind of loose and comfortably and wiggly. So averting your gaze, using a happy tone, using familiar phrases. Do you want to go outside? Do you want to go for a walk? Do sit, stay, you're a good boy, speaking softly to them. And then sometimes yawning, blinking, like those displacement signals for the dogs to relax themselves. Sometimes if we do it, it helps, especially blinking towards cats can help the cats. Making yourself feel small, leave and return later for cats. Sometimes that just kind of helps. And minimizing, of course, the loud noises, not slamming the guillotines. When you are walking the dogs, making sure we're kind of taking the path of least resistance of getting the dogs to not kind of go crazy. And then no staring at them, no hugging them, no kissing them. I'm not talking about your own dogs, dogs that you have a history with, that you live with. I kiss and hug my dogs all the time, but I've lived with them for 2 years. They're not in a stressful kennel environment. And so when you have a dog that you've never met before, so you're coming in for the weekend, you're like, I don't know this dog. When you're putting them out in the yard, it's probably not a good idea to turn around and walk back to the kennel with your back towards them, because they don't know you, you don't know them, and you just never know. A lot of the times, animal control is bringing a dog in the middle of the night, and they could have been fine and then they were chasing people and getting them. And so always just kind of keep the dog in your vision, so you should always have your eye on the dog. Don't grab a dog by their muzzle, their scruff, especially when we don't know the history of these dogs. And being an animal control officer in Independence, the citizens of Independence are a little rough-handed with their dogs. And so if they don't have a history with you and they only have a negative history with rough handling, it could kind of lead to a bite. And so I would just always be gentle with the dogs, not scruffing them, not muzzling, like holding down their muzzle, things like that. Avoid those verbal and physical corrections until you get to know the dog, because you never know that what happens after that leash pop out there with their owner could have been followed by something more abusive, and they're going to try to defend themselves. And then they're also just like at a level 9, 10 with their stress levels. And we know that when we're at that, our straw is a lot shorter. And so that leash pop or that correction could turn into just them biting you because they have a shorter straw. So if anybody escapes, don't try to grab the dog with your hands. We've had people when the dog escapes to grab the dog and the dog turns around and bites because they don't know what's behind them. They can't see what's behind. All of a sudden they just feel something grabbing and they turn around and they can nail your hand. So just let them go, grab a leash, radio, so that the dog can see us coming, and then we can fully see the dog so that we can leash the dog kind of more safe. And with the cats too, if the cat has escaped the kennel, just shut the doors and just call for help so that 2 staff people can help us all get the dog. Of course, just not leaning over the dogs. Cats, even though they're cat friendly, could still freak out with the sight of another cat. So for cats, if they don't see it, it doesn't exist. So Bo was one that I was petting, and he was like upside down, being all cute. He sees another cat, and all of a sudden, he is clawing me all over the place, bites my hand, and runs to the kennel. And then he's like, "Oh, hi!" Like the cat doesn't exist anymore. And so this is especially important, like for meet and greets, when you take a cat out of the kennel to present to another, like to the adopter, making sure that we're not doing it in front of another cat or that the cat below doesn't see them, because even though they could be cat friendly, that is not a correct way to introduce cats. And then all of a sudden they freak out and they think the cat's cat aggressive, and really it's just a bad first introduction, because in that cat's mind, that cat just appeared out of nowhere. So it's kind of scary. Never scream, never run, especially like when we're talking to kids in meet and greets. If a dog is getting all over them, like before, I always tell them like to stand like a tree. Don't scream, don't run. It's just going to arouse the dog even more. Petting dogs through a fence or over the fence, so through the kennel bars, like we can, they're just a little bit more aroused with that barrier. And so petting dogs through fences, and it only takes a second for a bite to occur, so focus on the animal that you are handling at that time, because like we said, in the first changes can happen in just a second. So what do dogs like? Dogs like to approach you. They don't like to be walked up to. And that's really hard for us to do, especially when we love animals so much, but calling the dog to you instead of being approached. They don't like being patted on the head. They like being petted under the chin, on the shoulders, the chest. They like frequent check-ins. So I do, when I'm petting a dog, when I'm first meeting them, I call them to me. Come here, Winnie. Call them to me. She'll come. I'll pet her 3 times. I'll pet 3 times on the chest, the shoulder, and then I'll stop. And then see, she's coming back to me for more pets. She just got shocked. Coming back to me for more pets. And you see that shake off after the shock. So, and then I'll pet her just a few, baby girl, a few more times. And I have a long history with Winnie, which is, and she kind of walked away, but then she came back. So that kind of frequent check-in, so that we're not forcing our petting on the dogs. But sometimes you'll see her walking away, and I'll tell my girls and people, they're saying, no, thank you, I've had enough, and I want to go explore something else. So following after the dog to keep petting them and things like that, they're saying no, like, I'm done. And that's probably because I pet her too hard and she just fell, and she's just like, I'm done with you. They like playing, they like walking, they like sniffing, they like digging, they like doing dog things. dog things that annoy, they like chewing, dog things that annoy us. And so giving them appropriate ways to express that dog behavior so that they can be, like we said in our 5 freedoms, that's the 5th freedom, normal dog behavior. They don't like direct eye contact. They don't like being walked up on and then bent over. You see that so many times, right? People, oh my gosh, your dog's so cute. Can I pet your dog? And then walk over, bend over, and do this. Like it's kind of cringy. They don't like hugs or restraints. We see oftentimes that the less restraint that we give a dog during intake, the more cooperative they are during the shots and stuff. There's times that we have to do restraint, and then they don't like obedience all the time. Sit, stop, don't, and I was talking about this during our first session. They go from a living space of a kennel to a living space in the yard, back to the kennel, back to the yard for months and months, and now they finally get out and get on leash and explore outside of those 2 kennels, and we're all like, sit, stop, down, sit. And so they're just going basically from 3 kennels for months, and then they get adopted. And so allowing them to play and sniff and do dog things, we have to meet the dog's basic needs before we can ask for obedience. And so we will talk more about that in the 3rd session. And if we are meeting the dog's basic needs, it will keep their stress levels down, rotations easier, and all of us safe, which is why. So how to greet a dog. Call the dog to you, don't walk up to the dog, and there's no need to put your hand out. That's just invading their space. I promise you, they can smell you from here. Winnie can smell me from out in the lobby. So there's even evidence now that there's nerves in the teeth and in the tongue that are connected to the nose that makes them be able to smell things like we can't even fathom what they can smell. Like we smell chicken noodle soup, they smell the celery, the onion, the thyme, the carrots, the chicken broth, and all the seasoning that goes in the chicken broth. Like they smell every single individual ingredient. So there's no need for us to stick our hand for them to smell us. They smell us. If they want, they might come to smell us some more to gather more information, and they'll come to us if they want to smell our shoes and our pant legs. So letting them come into our space instead of us and like going into their space will decrease bites. Most of the bites that happen in intake are because people reach their hand out for the dog to sniff them when the dog already can smell them. Stand to the side, pat your leg, and call them to you. Come here, Winnie. And then let her decide to stay. And then pet on the chest and the shoulders, and then stop and see if they ask for more. Winnie leaned into me some more, so she wants more. I'm obviously leaning over her. We shouldn't do that. Winnie and I've known Winnie since March. She's my office dog. You can do things like that with dogs that you know. But kind of going off to the side like this and then petting them like this, you're making yourself small. But I'm also on one foot to where if the dog suddenly changes, I'm able to get up and move away from them. So, and then consent is a thing. If they turn their back and walk away, they're saying, I'm done. So asking the dog, can I pet you, is basically what I just asked Winnie. And if she says no or I'm done, that's okay. Like we don't have to pet every dog. Consent is a thing with humans, consent is a thing with dogs, and consent is a thing with cats, and cats will certainly let you know. So getting a dog out of the kennel. So you have your slip lead. Slip leads are used so that the dog can't get loose and back out of it if they get scared. So you kind of open it up into a circle, and you can take the leash kind of more around and Dogs know what leashes are, right? And so it's a nice open circle for them to be able to put their head to. So as you approach the kennel, reading the dog's body language, am I going to want to get this dog out? If they're stiff, if they're barking and showing all their teeth, if you're not comfortable with it, get a staff member that they trust, but stay with that staff member so that the dog can learn to trust you and so that you can eventually get them out. And so standing next to that trusted staff member and going out to the yard and getting to know that dog so that in the future you can get them out. So you have the door open, you're opening the door, keep your foot at that door so the dog doesn't jump and then hit you in the head with the door. It's happened so many times. Yes, it does. And then you're just going to kind of leash through the door. And so if they're jumping and hyper and crazy, sometimes going over the top of the head and coming down is easier for those kind of dogs. Come here, Winnie. So going over the top and coming down is easier for the high arousal dogs. But like I said, with the petting under the chin and stuff, sometimes with the shyer dogs, just kind of being able to make a bigger hole and leashing like that. And we will talk about treats and stuff on the third session. So that's kind of how and then you're keeping the leash short on the way to the yard, on the way to will give you more control over the dog so that they're not yanking your shoulders and getting themselves into trouble. So when you're walking with the dog, so you have your row of kennels, you have your dog out, it should go kennel, dogs, dog, you're walking, you. You don't want to put yourself between the dog, you don't want to do kennels, a row of dogs, you and the dog. Because the dog could redirect as they are being reactive to the dogs in the kennel and turn around. That energy has to go somewhere, and it builds up, and they can turn around and nail you on the leg. And so putting yourself between that, the dogs and your dog you're walking, is just a recipe to get bit. So kennel, the dog, and you, and then keeping the dog kind of on a short leash so that you can walk them with more control. And so double check everything before you get the dog out or while you're getting the dog out, that the yard is empty that you're putting the dog into, that the dog is put back in the correct kennel, and that all the doors are securely latched. So there's a little S-hook in it, so you'll take out the S-hook, lift the kennel door up, open the door, and then when you're putting the dog back, you have to close it, latch it back down, and put the S-hook back in. And I think that's where we're getting dogs getting loose, is that when we go back to see how the dog get loosed, people are putting the S-hook in and then trying to latch it, and so the dog can just pop that kennel door right open. And then before you get the dog out, he should have 4 on the floor. I don't really, if they've been here for months and you're working with them several times a week, asking for a sit is fine, but really we just don't want him to jump all over you, because that sits up for when he comes out, it's just kind of harder all the way through that high arousal state. So asking the dog to stand, 4 on the floor to get out. And if they keep jumping, we'll shut the kennel door, turn our backs, and we will go over that also in part 3. I don't want to throw too much information at once. So when they were here, we went and we practiced getting dogs in and out of their kennels. And so when you guys volunteer, we will go through training, and then the more you practice, the easier it gets. So daily rounds. You guys kind of go see and touch every single dog and cat all week, right, with the way that the animal care works now. So daily rounds, Dr. Walker does it, I do it to keep track of the health and mental status of the animals in our care. So we kind of have, that's kind of how we keep track of who needs meds, who is struggling here. And so as you're setting up the emergency shelter system, I would kind of create a task list of action items for dogs that are struggling, which you'll be able to put together easily after part 3. A system of color-coded cards, who is struggling, who's easier, and we use dots of red, yellow, and green. So red dots are the dogs. They're not necessarily aggressive dogs. They can be very nice dogs, but if they're excessive pullers, if like Winnie is animal aggressive when she first meets a dog, and so she's a red dot dog because if a dog comes running up on her, or if she's at every single kennel door. And so even though she's a very friendly, sweet, nice dog, she's still a red dot dog because it takes an experienced handler to be able to safely walk her. And so thinking about green dots, yellow dots, red dots, and then designate a leader so that when you do have an issue with a dog or see a medical or mental problem, somebody has all that information to be able to get the dog the resources that they need. And like I said, in part 3 of the training, we're going to go over a lot of that, like training issues or the training protocols that we can do for dogs like that. So when we walk through the shelter, and I was talking about this in part 3, it's like we really want to do a once over the dog, flip their ears over, check to make sure their ears are clean, make sure that they don't have any body sensitivity issues, especially for the shelter. Like if we are petting a dog and they don't like their hind end touch and they turn around and snap us, we probably don't want to take that dog into a meet and greet full of kids, you know, and so things like that. And so just making sure that we're just kind of giving them a once over at least once a week. To note any new tumors too. Sometimes the tumors can hide under armpits and things like that. And so what we want to avoid is just like leashing the dog up, walking the dog, putting the dog back, and so that we can kind of give them a once over as on top of doing that kind of stuff. So we kind of create a series of questions during our daily rounds, like who are you? What condition are you in? And what do you need right now? And we can like go even further in saying, who's like a good match for you? Like what family are you going, like who are you and what family do you need to be successful in? So we've learned Winnie, even though she's 8 years old, cannot go to somebody who's 70 plus. She's been returned twice because who is Winnie? She's a high energy, high prey drive dog. And so even though she's 8 years old, to Winnie, that's just a number. She's more like a 4-year-old dog. And so what does she need to be successful? Somebody in their 50s or below, somebody who's active, and somebody who's an experienced dog handler to be successful in an adoptive home. And then what does Winnie need right now? Well, she needed out of the kennel space. Hal needed out of the kennel space. Right? I mean, all these dogs do, right? I mean, sheltering's not a natural, normal environment for a dog. But we can act now, and enrichment ideas that we talked about in the first session, getting help with the vet clinic, and so working with the families and getting the dogs on meds who might benefit from some short-term meds while they're being sheltered, and then maybe bringing the families in to spend some extra time with their dogs for those emergency sheltering. So in session 3, we're going to talk about defensive handling, how to keep yourself safe when a dog does decide to turn around and start biting you. So, and I'll kind of talk about some of my stories too, dogs that have been fine with staff members and I go out in the yard and they're literally like taking my clothes off because they're trying to bite me. Setting up the kennel space to make them, to make their stay the most comfortable. And so Carol and I are gonna have you guys get the pop-out kennels up, out, sit them all up. We're gonna pretend like we just got a call. There's been a fire at the apartment building and we have 26 dogs coming in and 5 cats. And so we're gonna set up the kennel space to quickly. And then intervention when needed. So we have a very shy, fearful dog. We have dogs who are stranger danger dogs. We have dogs that are hyperactive. Bingo, no, not Bingo, Buddy, Hal. So what intervention do they need? And we'll come up with training protocols and sheets so that you guys can say, oh, here's Goldie, here's Bingo, here's the training sheet that we can kind of work with them on. Here is Hal and Carmel, and so here's the training sheet that we can work with them on. So kind of generalize things, and I think that will help dogs be a little faster. So, and do you guys have any questions?